Pallatrax's Hidra bait range is something I think is really exciting. It's caught us literally thousands of fish. It's a range of basically sun-dried natural baits. We have 4 products in the range. We have the brown snails, the black snails, the water mussel and the small snails. Now all of these are packed naturally with proteins and nutrition that really do make up a big part of a fish's diet. Now they might look out of sorts with what is normally seen into the trade, the pastes, the pellets, the boilies, but I honestly can tell you these are incredible hook baits. Now they're hair riggable, you can chop them down in size, you can flavour them, you can dye them, and they are so easy to use. And really, if you think about it, really common sense. The fact that you can now hair rig a really good, big, juicy, fat snail, full of its own natural nutrition, or you can tilt it and play around with it, you can colour it and dye it a flavour that you know is really effective. And again, you have a balance where both nature and modern tactics dovetail, and they really, really do work. And it's such an easy product to use, whatever species. We've caught fish literally everywhere, massive carp, and we've caught some huge carp on this. And I suppose sometimes it really will look to you as out of sorts. You know, it's a bit like our stone weights, to be fair. You know, if you fished on leads forever, suddenly you're fishing on a stone, it looks out, even though it makes total common sense to do it. It's a bit like these snails. They really look strange, especially if you fished on boilies for as long as, you know, to be fair, the industry and the sport has fished on. Suddenly to be fishing on this great big snail. But I think the best way to look at it is if you were to ask somebody outside of fishing, would you fish on a round ball of flavour, or would you fish on something that the fish really do require in their daily diet? Anybody outside of fishing will straight away go towards the snail, because to be quite honest, it is such common sense. Like I say, it's an easy range to use, and I'm going to show you now in the next step of this video exactly how easy it is to make basically a hook bait, and also that can be incorporated in a load of different tactics for different species very, very easily. It's inexpensive, and I can promise you really, really is seriously effective. Now these really are easy baits to use. You look at, in these 2 examples here, I've got your brown snail and your black snail. Now they're hard, they look really unappealing, there's nothing attractive about them other than the smell. They do smell very, very distinct, both of them. So, next stage is literally putting them in water. So you put them in water, you'll see the black ones float for the time being, then they'll take in water and start to sink down. And you can literally put as many as you want, big ones, little ones, and literally you leave them in there for a few hours. In normal water temperature, you're talking about 4 hours. If it's colder, it'll take longer. If it's warmer, if you really want to rehydrate them, so where all the water sucks all back into them and they fill out, with warmer water or hot water, not boiling water, you can do it literally within 20-30 minutes. Personally, I always like to use the lake water, the water I'm fishing in. We all know that fish with this high sensory perception have the ability to detect things, and we all know the kind of chemicals that are in our drinking water, so that's my preference. So they go from these, as I said, really, really solid, natural snail. Let's say in this case, I just showed you the brown snail, and so basically they literally rehydrate totally differently than they were in their initial state of being really hard. They fill back with water, they're plump, they're juicy, and they're hair riggable. You can cut them down to size and just fish them straight on a hook. So that's the brown snail version. And again, the black snail, it just plumps up, sucks back on the water. And the amount of fish we're catching of all species, you know, genuinely we've caught some real clonkers, whether it's massive carp, barbel, chub. You know, it's just a protein-filled packet, and we mustn't forget or dismiss what fish really eat. And it's much more common sense to sometimes put on a hair or a hook something that's actually born in nature and that they feed on naturally. You may not, you know, you might be cautious. Does it actually hair rig? Here's just an example, and whilst we're filming here, this is a good example of a bait that's working efficiently at Horseshoe. Brian here has already caught a number of fish using the black snails, and they just do really hair rig. Nothing, they're very firm, they're very solid, you know, they don't just fall off. It's not like it's going to be a problem where small fish will bite it off or pull it off. That just doesn't happen. So it's really, really effective. Another particular favourite way of me of manipulating the Hydra, particularly with my almost go-to, the one I firstly start off is with the brown snail, is to flavour and dye them. Now basically you're taking that natural mass and you're impregnating it with a flavour and dye as it basically draws in as it rehydrates, and therefore you can manipulate your own bait. You can make your own flavour baits, you make your own colour baits, and you know that hook bait will have a base of really high protein, really high nutritional value. And again, it's really easy done. I mean, my favourite go-to flavour is jungle, which is tiger nut, peanut and coconut. And red and orange, bright colours, they all work differently. I don't think we'd ever know really which is the best colour. It's always a case of playing and mussing around and finding it. So you literally just need some water, add some of the dye to whatever colour you want to make it, add your flavour. Again, it's for you to mess around with, finding out the levels, playing around with it, finding out something that works on that day. Just gives you another dimension. So you just literally give it a quick stir, making sure everything's mixed together. And again, the longer you leave them in there, the longer they'll stain in, they'll impregnate in. And it is literally just a case then of popping a few of the different ones in. They'll all dye to some extent. I would suggest you leave them for about 12 to 24 hours, really let that flavour get inside there and the colour to stain through, and then basically they're great hook baits. I mean, you can freeze them down or keep them cool. Obviously, being a natural product, you don't want to leave them out in the sun. You know, they're like any other kind of meat. If you leave it out, it will go off. But you can freeze them, you can keep them in the fridge. They will last a long time in the fridge, and obviously they'll quite happily last on the bank for about 24 hours. So an example is, these are ones I made yesterday. I'm using on the trip here. This is the brown snail, as I mentioned. So it really has taken on that flavour and colour. It's plumped up from the hard, solid snail it was to a really fleshy snail, full of powerful flavour, a very vivid colour, great in places like here at Horseshoe, gin clear waters. It really stands out. So it's standing out on two levels, as a full of a flavour and a bright colour, bright visual colour. So during the day, it's a really good option. But I say, don't ever be under the illusion that this doesn't work. It actually is common sense why it works, and I can promise you it really does. One way to really prove how much the dye and the flavours impregnate is if I just get one of the snails that's been sat there for 24 hours in the dye and the flavours. If I cut him off in half, and you can see it doesn't just sit on the outside and coat it, it goes all the way through the middle. So when it gets in the water ingresses and pulls everything back out again. So really high attract, bright visual, great hook bait.